Welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Fellowship. My name is Charles Loflin, and I have the great privilege of being your ministerial intern and serving as your summer minister. I am delighted to welcome you today. Whether you are joining us for the very first time or whether you are a longtime member, thank you for taking time to be here. If you happen to be joining during our Facebook Live premiere or during our YouTube premiere, then I invite you to add a note in the chat so that we can say hello. As always, you can find out more information about the fellowship and its programming by going to our website at muuf.org. Welcome.
In the words of Annie Dillard, we are here to abet creation and to witness to it.
To notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house.
I invite us all to sing together the fire of commitment. From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
This summer, we've had the pleasure of having Charles Loflin be our summer minister, do a series of worships and workshops. But some of you may not know that he's also been working on Family Camp. Kerry Davis and Chris Johnson have been our main organisers for Family Camp this year. Charles and I helped along, and we connected all the services that Charles was doing and the workshop into family life. It all started when they picked up their goodie bags. They were filled with activities for the whole month that the families could do together, and they would gather on Sunday mornings to talk about new things, to connect with the services, and show off what they did. You'll hear them talk about mighty networks. We created and used a closed social media network, and we hope it's going to carry on for the rest of the year. If your family wants to be involved, make sure to let us know and we'll get you in on that action. We didn't want you to miss out, so here's your opportunity to get a sneak peek at what they've been doing.
Hi, I'm Carrie Davis.
Hey, I'm Chris Johnson. Together we did family camp this summer. Gosh, Carrie, camp was just so great. We started out with a blank slate, and you and I just went through all these different ways to get to where we got to at the end. And you had your strength, I had mine, and we brought in other people. It was just so wonderful.
I loved it. It was something that at the beginning, we had no idea how this thing was going to come together. And between the two of us and bringing in our own ideas and our own talents, it came out better than either of us could have done on our own.
Exactly. And then we had Charles with his ideas about what he was going to be preaching about. We took his ideas and that was kind of the skeleton of it all. And then we just added activities to do with that, Liz's stories. We had Stern's music involved, and everybody just kind of fit really well like a puzzle.
It was amazing. And so good to see on Sunday mornings, families all sitting together, having shared on Mighty Networks all their cool creations that were related to our theme, kids being able to see other kids' ideas and thoughts and inspirations.
A lot of that too was parents were hearing the sermons from Charles in the service, and then they were able to connect with their kids because they were hearing the stories with us, and then the activities kind of brought them all together. And families, it was a really good time because they're tired of just going to Zoom, and they're tired of being the same old activity at home. But now our faith was manifested in their activities together, and they had a good time together. It was really cool.
Yeah, something that was so unique about this was that it really was connecting families together, but then families to other families within our fellowship, and really also connecting the things that the kids were doing and the families were doing with the greater congregation.
Exactly. It was a true multi-age activity, right? A multi-age service every week, and the kids got into it. You could tell by their projects, so creative and so exciting.
And you could just see everybody light up, their faces light up when their pictures got shown or their videos got shown. One of the things I loved so much was that our kids were able to use multimedia in ways that they hadn't used it before. We had one kid who made a chalice lighting in Minecraft.
Yeah, that was very cool.
It was so cool. Okay.
Yeah, they were able to then light the chalice and say the opening words. Lainey did a great job with that. Wow, I really hope the creativity will continue into the school year. I know kids are going to be online a lot, but this was really different. This was their families getting involved and doing things at home together and then sharing it with each other at the fellowship. And one great thing about the fellowship is that we are there. We are a loving community, and we do want to connect with each other, and we want the kids to connect. So I hope the school year will prove that more kids will actually come and join us.
Margaret Fuller was the firstborn child of Unitarian parents. Her father was determined to give his daughter the best possible education, in other words, one that was reserved only for sons, and chose to teach the young Margaret himself. She seemed a sponge for many disciplines, including Latin, begun at age 6, English grammar, mathematics, history, music, and modern languages. Later, she would reflect that the price paid for her early and intensive drilling, which sometimes went late into the night, was sleeplessness and nightmares as a child, and a poor lifetime of poor eyesight and migraine headaches. Her natural brilliance gave Margaret a sense of superiority, which classmates interpreted as arrogance. Longing for admiration and companionship, she was socially awkward and unpopular among peers who responded to her with a mixture of awe and ridicule. However, the friendships she did develop were deep and often lifelong, such as with Lydia Marie Child, who would become a renowned novelist, editor, journalist, and radical abolitionist. Through Elizabeth Peabody, a mutual acquaintance, Ralph Waldo Emerson invited Fuller to visit for 3 weeks in the summer of 1836, the time at which Emerson was finishing his essay Nature. Emerson was initially put off by Fuller, but soon was won over and wrote to Elizabeth Peabody that his guest has the quickest apprehension and immediately learned all we knew and had us at her mercy when she pleased to make us laugh. She has noble traits and powers and cannot fail of a permanent success. In 1839, Fuller began to hold several series of conversations that attracted women of the city and surrounding area who were intellectuals and social activists. The circle included many prominent Unitarians. Though women might be taught the same subjects as men, they were prevented the same opportunity as men to fully leverage their learning. Fuller provided a setting where women could discuss what they knew, free to explore ideas and speak their own thoughts on such topics as classical mythology, education, ethics, the fine arts, and the role of women in society. Fuller served as the editor of the transcendentalist journal The Dial. Its contributors included Emerson, Bronson Alcott, Henry Hedge, Ellen Hooper, Carolyn Sturgis, Ellery Channing, Henry David Thoreau, Theodore Parker, Elizabeth Peabody, and George and Sophia Ripley. For almost 3 years, Margaret coaxed articles and poems from these reluctant writers and wrote much of the Dial's content herself. While part of the transcendentalist scene, Fuller wrote her personal credo. Raised a Unitarian, she later attended William Ellery Channing's Federal Street Church. Gradually, she adapted her inherited faith to her own needs, wishing to be, in her own words, in full possession of my reasoning powers. In 1842, she wrote that she believed in Christ because I can do without him, but I do not wish to do without him. But Christ was not enough. She did not reject the church, as did some transcendentalists, but she joined them in finding that nowhere I worship less than in places set apart for that purpose. The blue sky seen above the opposite roof preaches better than any brother. It was in 1845 that Fuller's book, Woman in the 19th Century, was published, a manifesto for the women's rights movement. It revealed Fuller's enormous knowledge of literature and philosophy as she described the oppression of the female sex through history and advocated equal status for women. Horace Greeley invited Fuller to write for his paper, the New York Tribune, and in 1846, Fuller became the newspaper's foreign correspondent while visiting Europe. In the midst of the 1848 uprisings in Italy, Austria, and France, she became the first American war correspondent. She saw a role for herself either as actor or historian. To her, the revolution meant freedom and human rights for the laboring classes and for women. Fuller met the Italian nobleman Giovanni Angelo Asali, to whom she bore a son. While the revolution briefly succeeded in establishing a Roman republic, it would not last, and Giovanni, Margaret, and their young son fled to Florence, where they became close friends with the Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning family. In May 1850, the family set sail for a return to America and New York. Through a series of unfortunate events, including an approaching hurricane, their ship struck a sandbar within sight of Fire Island and began to break apart. Although some of the crew managed to reach the shore, the Asali family perished on July 19, 1850. Margaret Fuller was 40 years old.
My hands are strong enough, they're strong enough, and I'm good enough My hands are strong enough to give love. I know that my arms are long enough, they're long enough, and I'm good enough. My arms are long enough to give love. I know that my heart is wide enough, it's wide enough, I'm good enough. My heart is wide enough to give love. I know that my light is bright enough, it's bright enough, I'm good enough. My light is bright enough to give love. And my heart is wide enough to give love. I know that my arms are long enough to give love. My hands are strong enough to give love.
This is part 4 of the summer sermon series inspired by the Reverend Dr. Thandayaka What Moves Us, Unitarian Universalist Theology, from the UUA Tapestry of Faith curriculum. The first of our 6 UU sources affirms the role of direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. As Unitarian Universalists, we deeply value the fullness of our own experience in the process of creating meaning in our lives. Direct experience is not our only source of inspiration, but it is an indispensable and sacred aspect of our theology and tradition. Now, by way of review, in part 1 of this series, we explored how the experience of love, especially that kind of love that is deep, abundant, and transformative, moves us, and how George de Benneville articulated a theology of love that is central to our Universalist roots. In part 2, our Universalist forebear Hosea Ballou's claim that the experience of happiness moves us, particularly when our concept of happiness is informed by covenantal community, grounds our faith in a theology that can lead to liberation. From the Unitarian branch of our history, William Ellery Channing suggests that we are moved by the experience of struggle, and that invites us to bring our full, complete, imperfect selves to our religious community. Today, in the penultimate installment of the series, we invite the perspective of Margaret Fuller to explore how an experience of the heart can inform our Unitarian Universalist faith and call us to social action. John Madison chose the title The Lives of Margaret Fuller for his biography, implicitly acknowledging the difficulty in succinctly telling her story. That's a book I highly recommend, by the way. And if distilling Fuller's life to the confines of a single book is difficult, doing justice to such a full life in a single reflection is genuinely impossible. Deciding which aspect of Margaret Fuller's life to highlight is not an easy task. But the one I've chosen, one of the most pivotal moments in her all-too-short life, occurs around 1845, which is the same year that she published her book, Woman in the 19th Century. That book was an expansion of an article she had written for the Dial under the title The Great Lawsuit, Man versus Men, Woman versus Women. In a multitude of ways, the book is a synthesis of Margaret Fuller herself. The most prominent woman among the Transcendentalists, she underscores many of the core philosophical ideas of that movement, particularly the cultivation of the individual. But for Fuller, that's a concept that she insists must be equally extended to women and men. Fully embracing her literary talent and her multidisciplinary intellectual gifts, the book reflects the oratory style of her day. In fact, it's now considered one of the major documents in American feminism. It genuinely blazed a trail that would be embraced in the women's rights movement. Yet while the book was successful, it also drew some harsh and unkind criticism. And some of that criticism came from the very circle of Fuller's friends and supporters. Once again, Margaret Fuller found herself caught in a contradiction not of her own making. As a child prodigy, In many circles, she was lauded for her intellectual brilliance, but also, at the same time, marginalized as an aberration, sometimes portrayed as the exception that proves the rule. And just in case it's not clear, the rule is that women were inferior to men. This is the same Margaret Fuller that became the first woman ever to set foot in the vast library at Harvard and was extended privileges to borrow books, but was simultaneously denied the opportunity for a Harvard education because at that time the institution was barred to all women. She would experience similar marginalization even among the inner circle of the transcendentalists. Emerson insisted that Fuller was the only one among their number who was capable of fulfilling the role of editor for their conceived literary journal, The Dial. And yet, even once she had the power and authority as editor, Margaret Fuller found herself constantly in a position of trying to extract publishable material from her peers. So much so that she frequently was forced to write much of the content for The Dial herself. Among the greatest accomplishments in her life were the series of conversations that she hosted in Boston. That provided a forum for the women who attended to engage in truly speaking their thoughts and fully exploring their ideas on subjects that too often were reserved only for the men of society. As successful as those conversations were, they were not without criticism, and once again that criticism came from within. This recurring theme in Margaret Fuller's life is so very important. Her direct experience of the heart was so often a combination of both joy and sorrow. The very things that brought this remarkable woman the greatest satisfaction were also the same sources of enormous disappointment and at times heartbreak. The character of Margaret Fuller was such that she felt it all, and felt it all so deeply. You know, in so many ways, that is still the story almost 200 years later. Despite our so-called progress, the truth remains that women in power and women with authority are criticized precisely for exercising that power and authority. Isn't it far past time for all of us to say enough already? And moreover, may we have the courage to genuinely examine our own complicity in this regard. We are not exempt as religious liberals nor as Unitarian Universalists, and if we are truly committed to becoming, in both word and deed, a movement that is anti-oppressive, then we have to be diligent in rooting out the vestiges of all oppression, including the sexism in our midst. Another critical evolution in Margaret Fuller's thinking corresponds to this same time period. Fuller had begun to understand the need to embrace both her emotional life and her intellectual gifts. And that marks an important transformation, because at this point, Fuller becomes a critic of both transcendentalist and Unitarian dogma. The Boston Unitarian elite that formed her circle of colleagues and peers to a great extent embraced reason and rationality to the detriment of even acknowledging what Fuller would call the role of emotions in our lives. Even her beloved Ralph Waldo Emerson was subject to that same scrutiny. Fuller was finally able to articulate the essence of what she perceived as the difference that divided the two of them. Of Emerson, she said, "You are intellect. I am life. Whatever is truly felt has some precious meaning." And the pragmatic aspect of this realization would manifest in Fuller's life by a marked turn to advocacy. She became an international advocate for human rights in America. It is from this point she becomes a staunch advocate for abolition, as well as for the rights of Native Americans. She also fights for the economic justice of the poor and the civil rights for all women. You know, if Hosea Ballou is our most prominent Universalist, and William Ellery Channing is the most esteemed Unitarian forebear, I might make the case that Margaret Fuller deserves consideration as the embodiment of the modern spirit of Unitarian Universalism. In her, I see the beginnings of a synthesis of thought and an unapologetic embrace of a call to advocacy. Fuller said, "I have pledged myself to nothing. God and the soul and nature are all my creed. Subdivisions are unimportant. I act for myself, but prescribe for none other." John Madison says of Fuller that as a younger woman, she had never been political by nature. Her preferred solutions had always been cerebral. The key to life had always lain in the primacy of one's inner world. But now, she was more conscious than before of the ways in which the real world could thwart one's yearnings for perfection. And she began to envision and embody the understanding that the spiritual is the social. And as many more in later times would realize, the personal is the political. Her thought was more balanced, practical, and holistic than ever before. Dear friends, what might it mean for this fellowship, for this faith, for this world, if we were to take seriously Margaret Fuller's call to a theology of the heart? How might that move us? I imagine it would fill our lives to overflowing. And I also imagine that at times it would break our hearts wide open. But isn't that exactly the point? Isn't it true that hearts that are able to change the world are hearts that are vulnerable to that very world? What moves us? The experience of the heart can move us. May it be so.
One more step. We will take one more step till there is peace on earth for everyone. We'll take one more step. One more word. We will say one more word till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more prayer. We will say one more prayer till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song. We will sing one more song till every song is heard by everyone. We'll sing one more song.
Our closing words are from Singing the Living Tradition number 575, A New Manifestation by Margaret Fuller. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come, when man and woman may regard one another as brother and sister, able both to appreciate and to prophesy to one another. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come. What woman needs is not as a woman to act or rule, but as a nature to grow, as an intelligence to discern, as a soul to live freely and unimpeded, to unfold such powers as were given her. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come. Man does not have his fair share either. His energies are repressed and distorted by the interposition of artificial obstacles. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come, We would have every arbitrary barrier thrown down. We would have every path laid open to woman as freely as to man. Were this done, we believe a divine energy would pervade nature to a degree unknown in the history of former ages. A new manifestation is at hand. A new hour is come. Oh, beloveds, go in peace.